Hello viewers and welcome to another match of Warhammer 40,000 Conquest. My name is Mitch and I am the Hive Tyrant. This is the first game that I played of the single elimination portion of Sam Mann's Black Crusade, his online Conquest LCG competitive league. And to get to this point in the tournament, myself and about 114 or so other entrants each played through 6 consecutive rounds of Swiss, and for those 6 games, I got 5 wins and 1 loss, which secured my position as the 4th seed of 32 players, which each made through to the top cut of this tournament. For this first week of single elimination, I was paired against Paul Steiner, a gentleman who was actually crowned the tournament of the 2nd ever Octagon League for Conquest LCG, and he currently runs the Conquest Games Results Statistical Database at 40kconquest.blogspot.com. I had absolutely no idea what to expect in regard to what kind of warlord Paul liked to play or who he might bring, so I approached this match with my all-comers deck, so I opted for Broderick Worr over Captain Cato Sicarius. Note that Paul is going to be beginning the game holding the initiative token, and at present, he's decided to keep his opening hand, but I'm still thinking upon mine. I don't have a lot of units in hand, but I have kind of some interesting possibilities here. Standing out at the forefront of my mind, I've got 2 copies of Ammo Depot, so it's a 1-cost deploy. Its action eats a deploy action, and therefore, if I can manage to get both of these out early game up and running over the course of a potentially longish game, they could just reel in a monumental economic benefit for me. So I felt great about those 2 ammo depots. I've got 3 limited keyword cards in hand, but one of those happened to be troop transport, and in addition to that, I've also got a copy of my signature army unit, the Formidable Anxious Infantry Platoon, and even if I maybe throw that out to planet number 1, even though Zarathur is going to be able to attack first, it's possible that I might be able to win that planet with that unit, or I can just try to play as long a game as possible, just to really get the most benefit out of those ammo depots. But apart from that, I've also got a Sanctioned Psyker, a nice economy unit, and just in assessing our opening layout of planets here, the first 2 planets are those tri-icon planets. They've also got green icons printed upon them, and that means that Broderick Worr's ability is going to be up and functioning at each and every one of those planets. Something to keep in mind is that I'm commentating this match approximately a week or so after I played it, so I'm not going to remember all of my thought processes perfectly, but I'll give it a good old college try regardless. Note that my first several deploy actions are all trying to give as little information as possible to my opponent. He's thrown out a copy of Splintered Path Acolyte to planet number 4, so it's a 1 command icon, 1 cost unit. He's now got a copy of Noise Marine Zealots at planet number 1, and that's a really formidable unit, and it kind of deters me from trying to put anything at that planet. He's got initiative, he's potentially going to be able to attack for 5 if Zarathur shows up at that planet, so I'm already starting to think that I'm probably going to be avoiding that destination with my Warlord, despite troop transport being able to explode and deploy 2, potentially 2 attack, 2 hit point guardsman tokens to a green planet. He throws a copy of Rotten Plague Bearers to planet number 1, and so far as I'm concerned, that makes my decision-making process extraordinarily easy during this first round, because there is absolutely no way in hell that I'm going to have my Warlord show up to planet number 1. Just in case Zarathur shows up, the Rotten Plague Bearers can hit my Warlord for 2 as an action, and then the Noise Marine Zealots, being able to attack prior to my option to retreat, they could potentially hit my Warlord for 5, and then it might be game over as early as that. But just note, I've got 6 resources right now relative to Paul's 1, so throwing out an ammo depot has been great, throwing out a troop transport has been great. At this point, I'm considering playing a Sanctioned Psyker, and I think in hindsight, I'd have played my ammo depot prior to that Sanctioned Psyker, just because, again, I want to give Paul as little information as possible, and because I made this small, let's just go ahead and call it a mistake, he knows, obviously, obviously, well, I might as well toss a promotion out onto this Splintered Path Acolyte here. So Paul's sitting at 3 command icons relative to my 2, and prior to my playing an additional prior to my playing the second ammo depot, I throw out my other Anxious Infantry platoon, and really, once again, I feel as though this is somewhat suboptimal. Like, note, I'm now at 3 cards in hand, but I feel like it would have been much more beneficial for me to throw out that depot, start generating cards through that depot, and then put out my command units. But at this point, Paul has passed. I've triggered an ammo depot to add a card to my hand, and I came across a copy of Steel Legion Chimera. So let's start to think about the command phase here. So planet number 1 is... There's no way in hell that I'm going to send Broderick Worr to that planet. I've got my Anxious Infantry platoon sitting at planet number 2. First off, it's at a green planet, so it can't be routed. Presumably, Zarathur is going to be allied with Dark Eldar, so Archon's Terror is going to be something I'm concerned about. And there's a little bit of a statistical dearth of those strong point icons on our just planet flop. 60% of the planets generally have green icons, and so far we only see 2 out of the 5. But there is a pretty reasonable chance that we'll be seeing some more green planets. So at the moment, my thought going into the game from here is just kind of, I'll see what exactly happens, I'll see what planets I can opportunistically pick up, and for the moment, I just think to myself, okay, Paul, you can have planet number 1, I don't really care. Then your Noise Marine Zealots and your Rotten Plague Bearers are going to be showing up at a subsequent planet exhausted alongside your Warlords, so they'll hopefully be a little bit easy to predict, and if possible, I might be able to pick them off while they're exhausted. So, because of Ammo Depot, I added a copy of Emperor's Warrant to my hand, one of my absolute favorite cards in all of Conquest. You simply exhaust an army unit, and then you deal damage equal to its attack to another army unit at that planet, and that could just be absolutely fantastic in potentially having the Noise Marine Zealots decimate that Rotten Plague Bearers, but of course, I don't have a lot of resources, and I cannot guarantee that Broderick Worr would show up at planet number 1 alone. So I'm starting to think, okay, planet number 1, I don't want to send my Warlord there. Planet number 2 would just be pointless to send a Warlord to. Planet number 3 would be alright, because that's Elwith. It's got 2 card bonus, so that's definitely desirable to me. Or, in case Zarathur shows up at that planet, it might be favorable for me to instead go to planet number 5, so that I could win Aatrox Prime. That's going to be a card and a resource, and then I could use Aatrox Prime to blast that Splintered Path Acolyte sitting at planet number 4. So I do not exactly remember where I go. I'm thinking that a great destination for Paul is going to be planet number 3, and as you can see, judging by the movement of my mouse cursor, I'm trying to predict where the enemy Warlord is going to arrive at and where my own Warlord might go. I've got that troop transport to back me up, but if it's only able to generate a single 1/2 guardsman token, that's really a suboptimal use of it, and I'd much rather kind of avoid dealing with Zarathur. I'm also kind of worried in the back of my mind about an Infernal Gateway with the possibility of another Noise Marine Zealots or something like that, so I let Paul go to planet number 3. Again, my thought here is I could clear out that Splintered Path Acolyte, put a little bit of pressure on Paul to shield, or if he gives up that planet, then that's going to be a little bit of, an additional 2 resources that I could potentially earn each and every round. So Paul gets 2 cards and 3 resources, and I myself only come across 2 cards and 1 resource, but part of the reason why I was okay with giving up Elwith is because I've got those 2 copies of Ammo Depot, and therefore if I can kind of lean ever so slightly more toward drawing resources or drawing a card and a resource at each planet, that's probably going to end up working out better for me in the long term than if I have a handful of cards and then my ammo depots are unable to afford me, first of all, card draw, and then second of all, a deploy stall. So I'm trying to think if there's any benefit whatsoever to blowing up my troop transport at planet number 1 and using the Emperor's Warrant to try to win at that same planet. So what I could do is my opponent has an action window, but I could still have my troop transport detonate at planet number 1. Then he could use an action, exhaust one of his plague bearers to deal a point of damage to one of my guardsmen, and then once it's my action, I could use the Emperor's Warrant to exhaust that Noise Marine Zealot, have it deal 2 points of damage to Paul's Rotten Plague Bearer, and then I might potentially be able to steal the planet from him. So I end up deciding not to do that just because Paul has got 4 resources and 5 cards in hand. Tzeentch's Firestorm is always a bit of a concern, so I just say, okay, congratulations, Paul, you win planet number 1, so that's going to be a material, strong point, and technology icon gained by him. I was not expecting Paul to trigger Yvarn, and of course he does not. So planet number 3, I indicate that I have no actions, and this is going to be Paul's opportunity to win at that planet. He'll be able to look at the top 3 cards of his deck and then add one of those to his hand and put the remaining 2 on the bottom of his deck in the order of his choice, and just kind of noticing a little bit of a trend in my games. It seems like my first turn, I normally give up some sort of favorable battle ability to my opponent, which hurts me, but I feel like whether you agree or disagree, and please, you're always encouraged to leave feedback on my gameplay in the comments, I feel like I'm able to give up something that would be beneficial in the short term, like Taurus or Eloith, in order to draw something more long-term favorable. So we move on to planet number 5 after Paul decides he's found something he wants and adds it to his hand. I ask if he has an action. The answer is going to be no. And I actually decide to hit Paul's HQ. So my thought here in blasting his HQ over that Splintered Path Acolyte was, of course, that I've got a promotion in hand, so I could throw out that promotion onto the Sanctioned Psyker, and if I can potentially bloody Zarathur, then he is just going to absolutely crumple, and then dealing out a point of damage to the Rotten Plague Bearers and those Noise Marine Zealots, which potentially could attack for 5. I just wanted to get rid of those at any and all circumstances possible. So we've gone through an HQ phase. I drew yet another copy of promotion, but I also came across a copy of my signature support, the monumentally powerful Forward Barracks, where so long as I can maintain some sort of presence, an Imperial Guard presence at a planet, I can generate an additional Guardsman token. It's probably my favorite card in the game, just because I love squeezing as much value as I can, and that feeling when you get it to consecutively trigger and there's absolutely nothing your opponent can do, it just feels absolutely wonderful here. Note that our new planet number 5 is going to be yet another green strong point icon-laden planet. It's going to be Ossus 4, the Steel 1 resource planet, and my opponent throws out a copy of Promise of Glory to generate some cultist tokens. And at the moment, I'm trying to think to myself, okay, what exactly can I do to deploy stall for as long as possible? I throw out a copy of Sakhalem Shrine Guards to a green planet. Again, my thought process, instead of throwing it to a planet like Eloith where I could get that card bonus, I wanted to just put it at a green planet where it can't be routed and it's going to get its natural bonus and it's going to get Broderick Worr's bonus. So it's going to be a 3/2 unit with a command icon sitting at that planet, potentially drawing me additional resources. And at the moment, as much as I would love Eloith's battle ability, I think it's going to be hugely beneficial for me to get a lot of resources to really get those ammo depots going, just because it's unlikely that I'll be able to benefit from those during this deploy phase, but I feel like if I can just keep on pumping out shield cards, if I can replenish my hand and then throw out more shield cards, that's going to just be a fabulous combo with Forward Barracks. But I'm starting to get a lot of different options here. So I've distributed some economy units. Paul has got 7 resources and 6 cards in hand, which I will confess is fairly frightening. He's got those cultist tokens, but just some things I'm keeping in mind is if at any point he wants to use that Splintered Path Acolyte, he'll forfeit winning command at that planet. I've got a copy of Promotion, which I can throw out onto my Sanctioned Psyker, and I'm just trying to think where, if if anywhere, do I want to put my copy of Steel Legion Chimera or that Anxious Infantry platoon? Currently, planet number 1, I don't necessarily think Broderick is going to have to show up to that planet because I can do, first of all, I will be able to attack with my Anxious Infantry platoon. I've got the Emperor's Warrant, that's a nice 2 shield card. I've got other 1 shield cards in hand. I've got Ammo Depot, which can replenish my hand, but if Zarathur shows up at a green planet, they're number 1, he could attack me, kill my platoon, then I could use troop transport, then at the end of a round, I could have forward barracks trigger, I could slowly but surely beat Zarathur away from that planet, and then the instant Zarathur does retreat, I can really turn on the punishment nozzle by throwing out the Emperor's Warrant and just absolutely wrecking whatever units are left. So I've got those options available to me, and as always, I just kind of do this little bit of a speaking out loud to myself, trying to think, what is the most desirable planet for Zarathur to go to? So Zarathur's got 1 planet type icon of each color. Planet number 1 would be a little bit tricky for Zarathur to go to, so he puts a copy of Noise Marine Zealots to planet number 2, so I'm thinking I'm probably not going to send my Warlord there. I probably don't need to go to planet number 1 because that's that healing planet, and I don't really care about healing any of my units. But all the same, I'm also starting to think if I show up at planet number 1 with my Warlord, I can actually take quite a bit of damage before I need to, so long as I don't end up being bloodied, so long as I can win that planet, that is potentially going to, if Broderick's sitting there with 5 damage on him, but I win the planet, then I can just pull all that damage off of him. So I'm thinking planet number 1 might be a great possibility, just because if Zarathur arrives at planet number 1, if he's also able to capture subsequent planet number 2, that is going to be the game there for yours truly. So I don't want to send my Warlord to planet number 1. I'd much rather send my Warlord to planet number 4, pull in that resource and that card, but I'm just thinking that's probably not the best idea in the world. I can't quite recall what exactly I do with the remainder of my deploy phase. I've got that copy of Promotions sitting out, affixed to my Sanction Psyker so that I'm winning command at that planet. But I think if Zarathur arrives at planet number 1, he'll potentially take a fair bit of damage to his Warlord, but that might be his best possibility to try to get a victory here against Broderick. And looks like I'm just still absolutely not sure. Okay, so I end up using a Steel Legion Chimera, and I throw that to Planet 4. And again, I guess my thought behind putting that there as over Planet number 1 is if I send my Warlord to Planet number 1, then I'll be winning command at that planet, but I'd also love that additional card and resource associated with Planet 4, and I'm guaranteed to be getting say 4 resources between planets 3 and 5. I also thought about putting my Steel Legion Chimera to planet number 2. Something very interesting is Paul uses a copy of Sowing Chaos, and this wasn't really something that I had been keeping in mind. It slightly took me by surprise, but at the same time, I wasn't at the point where I felt as though I deployed heavily to green planets. And this is where I'm thinking I basically have to send Broderick to planet number 1 so that I can try to deal out a bunch of damage to Zarathur so that I can try to win that fight, just because I would absolutely hate to lose the game. At this point, I've got 4 cards in hand. I'm unable to, as of yet, get to that threshold where I'm triggering ammo depots. I could have used troop transport prematurely just to make sure that I have another bit of a deploy action here, but if there was anything that convinced me to go to planet number 1, it was kind of this move here. So Paul uses up his cultist tokens, he puts out a copy of Zarathur's Flamers to planet number 1, and I'm doing a whole hell of a lot of mental math in my mind. I think, okay, if I show up at this planet, I could swing, potentially kill Zarathur's Flamers. Note, Paul's copy of Ammo Depot is used up, and if I can kill the Flamers, then they can't be sacrificed in order to damage some of my units. I was thinking, I could potentially get maybe a swing off, kill the flamers, then Zarathur arrives, he maybe attacks me himself, maybe the Zarathur's flamers attack, okay, let me walk through my thought process here. So let's say Broderick arrives at planet number 1. Best case scenario is I swing, I kill Zarathur's flamers. Worst case scenario is Broderick does not kill it. Zarathur attacks me for 2, which I could shield against. Then the flamers attack me for 3, which I could also shield against. Then we come to the end of a combat round. I can pop my troop transport. Maybe Paul deals some damage to my units. Or maybe I get the chance to attack with 2 guardsman tokens. I'll be able to use my ammo depots as shields, and whether I try to kill some of the enemy units or drive Zarathur away from that planet and then use the Emperor's Warrant, I've got a lot of different options. So I think it's probably going to be a very narrow fight, but I figure I might as well risk it anyway. I don't want to lose on planet number 3, and I figure that this will be kind of a nice make or break scenario if I do decide to go to planet number 1. So because I've got to go through a lot of careful mathematics in my mind, I throw out that I'm thinking, so I want to be absolutely certain that I want to go to planet number 1. A lot of people complained about my last video, my last round of Swiss, that I'm a very slow player, and I do apologize for that, but I figure since there's a lot on the line in this competitive league, since I'm a fairly prominent community figure, I definitely don't want to embarrass and make an ass of myself, so I definitely take my time when it comes to mental calculations here. But if Broderick shows up at planet number 1, really the only unknowns that can cause a lot of trouble for me would be just copies of Tzeentch's Firestorm. He's only got 2 resources and 4 cards, but I can rest assured that he's going to be winning 2 cards, and apart from maybe one Tzeentch's Firestorm being problematic, I'm not too worried about anything else. So, just kind of like I was thinking, Zarathur decides to go to planet number 1, and perhaps this is one of the ballsiest things I've ever done in regard to where I want to commit my Warlord, but I nevertheless feel as though it was appropriate, and in hindsight, it may have been much more conservative to have my Steel Legion Chimera deployed to planet number 1, because, it's nice that it won me a card and a resource, but I'd have definitely appreciated having a 3-4 unit sitting at that planet to sponge up a lot of attacks and to deal out a considerable amount of damage. So we'll have to see if it pays off for me, but I ended up getting 1 card and 5 resources, which I was okay with, because I've still got my ammo depots, I've still got my troop transport, and then Paul got a grand total of 3 cards, because he wins command at planet number 1, and I suppose by throwing Steel Legion Chimera to planet number 1, I'd have also blocked my opponent from drawing a card, so I think that was probably a rather suboptimal play all around, but the one thing working in my favor is I do have initiative at this first planet, and therefore I'll be able to potentially kill this Zarathur's Flamers or the Noise Marine Zealots, but Paul has got 7 cards in hand. I indicate that I have no action, and because I'm playing as Broderick, because he's playing as Zarathur, I was very careful to make sure that I mind everybody's P's and Q's in regard to action windows here. So I can only imagine that I'm going to end up attacking Zarathur's Flamers, just because if you don't take any risks, you don't reap any rewards. Again, I really regret that Steel Legion Chimera to planet number 4, but kind of my mindset in this tournament was that if I get eliminated, that's fine. I don't have to keep putting out videos of myself, just because it takes a ton of effort, and it looks like I actually decided, I was thinking that if I take a swing at Zarathur's Flamers, there's a very significant chance I'm not going to be able to kill it. And if I can bloody Zarathur, then great, or if I can drive Zarathur away from the planet, then that is going to be even better, because then I can use the Emperor's Warrant during the following combat round and really even the odds, despite not playing a Tau deck, if you catch the terrible pun there. So I've attacked with Broderick, and then he's going to take a swing for 3 at me. I discard a copy of Promotion, and that's going to be 2 points of damage dealt out onto Broderick, and I'm going to be posed with a very difficult choice when it comes to whether or not I should retreat at the end of the first combat round here. But I say that I do have an action, and note that I do this prior to Paul's second opportunity to attack. And do let me know if you think this was suboptimal or not. What I was thinking I might be able to do is attack with one of these guardsman tokens, then Zarathur attacks another token, and then I discard a copy of promotion in order to preserve a guardsman token, and then he's going to have to invest in something like a firestorm or some sort of event just to kill off a token, as opposed to piling more and more damage onto my warlord. Interestingly, he decides to throw away a copy of Zarathur's Flamers, and I'm trying to think about how realistic it is as to whether or not I'll be able to get Zarathur off of this planet. I'm thinking that I probably shouldn't probably rely on that, so I'm thinking, okay, why don't I just get rid of the Emperor's Warrant now? So I use that to turn that 3 damage dealt as an action upon sacrificing the Flamers to just 1 point. I use a copy of Ammo Depot, I add another 2 shield value card to my hand, the incredibly powerful Preemptive Barrage, and generally that is great for, again, possibly bloodying Zarathur, but I feel like this round here is kind of going to make or break this battle. So Paul spends 2 resources. He deals a total of 3 points of damage to my wounded guardsman, and I don't have my commissarial bolt pistol to throw away, but that's going to be all of Paul's resources, and now all of a sudden my math is starting to become ever so slightly easier. So if I can just keep my units alive and shielded, if I deal out enough damage, I'm potentially going to be able to take this one. So all of a sudden, I don't need to worry nearly so much about damage being thrown out from events. I've got my guardsman token. Paul finally indicates that he's out of actions, and instead of attacking Zarathur, I'm starting to readjust my strategy here. So I've got a guardsman token attacking for 2. Paul has got now 4 cards remaining in hand because he discards a copy of Warpstorm just to preserve his Noise Marine Zealots. And something I'm quite concerned about is the fact that these Zealots, if they're allowed to stay at that planet, they could potentially attack for 5 if he does not retreat with his warlord. So Zarathur takes a swing at my warlord directly, and this is where I've got to do a lot of difficult math. So I toss out a couple points of damage onto Broderick right away, and I'm probably going to say in the chat log thinking or something like that. Yeah, so I say sec. I'm trying to think if I actually want to deal that damage after assigning it. And here's my thought. Like, let's say if I throw away that Preemptive Barrage, Broderick only has 2 points of damage. I'll be able to use the Ammo Depot to add a shield card to my hand, and then we'll come to the end of a combat round. I'll generate a Guardsman token. I'll have a Warlord that only has 2 points of damage on it, and I'll be able to get 1 additional attack to potentially kill that Noise Marine Zealots. After I attack with a guardsman token, if I don't kill the zealots, then I could retreat with my warlord, or if I get a shield card, courtesy of Ammo Depot, then I can play it all the more safe, and I may actually have to use the combat turn to retreat with my warlord, but that Rotten Plague Bears kind of complicates things as well. So I do decide to throw out the Preemptive Barrage, so Broderick is going to be sitting at 2 points of damage, so that didn't quite come off, and there we go. So we'll come to the end of a combat round. I'll generate a guardsman token in just a moment. I think, yeah, I use my Ammo Depot to draw 1 additional card. There I go ahead and exhaust that to draw a card prior to the end of a combat round, and then something that helps me in doing all this math is I happen to draw my 3 shield value card. So I'm thinking, okay, if I decide to stay with my warlord, if he uses the action of the Rotten Plague Bearer to deal a point of damage to Broderick, albeit, 2 points, I could discard the promotion as shield, albeit 3 points of damage on Broderick out of his 6. If the Noise Marine Zealots attacks me, I'll be at like I could do my 3 shield card, then I'll be at 5, and if I absolutely have to, I'll be able to retreat, and if he really decides to push trying to bloody my Warlord, I'll be able to attack and potentially kill off his Noise Marine Zealots, kill off his Rotten Plague Bearers, and then we'll come to the end of a combat round, I'll generate another token, and then if I've got 2 tokens in play, there's not going to be anything that Paul is going to do to stop me. So I feel it was pretty fortunate for me to actually come across that copy of the Commissarial Bolt Pistol. And I'm currently thinking, okay, do I want to be risky or do I want to retreat? If I give up this fight, it's going to be really difficult for me to try to reestablish myself at our current planet number 2 because Zarathur is going to have initiative and he'll be able to attack with a Noise Marine Zealots. So I'm kind of thinking like this is the moment that's either going to make or break the game. I'm either going to be able to win this planet right now, pick up 3 planet type icons of my own, and block Zarathur from winning the game at planet number 2 and planet number 3. And then I'm thinking, okay, if I can go to Aatrox Prime, if I can win that planet, then things will actually work out okay. And if I manage to pick up this planet, if I pick up 3 and 4, then that could be a victory condition for me. But so long as I block Zarathur from winning, I'm okay with that, and if this comes down to a last planet win, probably the longer I can stretch out this game, if I can continue to break our Chaos players' economy, then I'll be totally okay with that. So again, I apologize to you, dear viewers, for the time that I spent doing this combat math, because of course it's all mental. You know, you aren't in an official FFG tournament allowed to make use of like writing anything down, so I'm just trying to think, what could he possibly be having in regard to shield cards? I think he's used 1 or maybe 2 copies of 2 value shield card, and let's pause for a moment and see what exactly I decide to do. All right, so we come to the end of a combat round, and I do decide to retreat. I suppose in hindsight, having gone through the math another time, I guess I feel like it was maybe a mistake for me to retreat, just because, like I said before, if I attack with Broderick Worr, I might be able to kill off that Noise Marine Zealots, but really the worst case scenario is I would take a modified, 3 points of damage on Broderick prior to my ability to do anything. Or I guess another way that I could have thought about it is if I can just preserve these Guardsman tokens, then I could potentially win without having to endanger my Warlord. So maybe it was a mistake to retreat mathematically, but I just had no clue what Paul had in his hand, and I guess if I had to retreat with my Warlord, I wanted to do so with as little damage as possible. So I guess I get rid of a Guardsman token, and once again, I can't help but feel like that is just a heinous mistake to have actually done that. And I almost feel like, you know, reviewing this match a week later, that I'm almost throwing this away. I don't necessarily feel that I should have retreated with my Warlord, and I definitely don't think that I should have, I really don't feel as though I should have not shielded that Guardsman token, because my 1 remaining token takes a swing, and I think if it were not for... if Paul would have been able to shield against the attack going out to that Noise Marine Zealots, I feel like that probably easily would have cost me the game, so definitely benefit from my shitty gameplay, and to everyone out there that says I'm starting to be a decent player, let this provide evidence that that is not quite yet the case. So, suboptimal play allowing that Guardsman token to be destroyed, questionable play retreating with my Warlord, but fortunately we do come to the end of a combat round after I've killed those Noise Marine Zealots. All of our units are ready. I generate another Guardsman token courtesy of Forward Barracks, and he attacks with a Rotten... he uses the action of a Rotten Plague Bearer And I'm trying to decide whether or not I want to shield this. I've only got my signature attachment in hand, and I decide, okay, I do want to shield it. So I've got the initiative, and remember that... I guess at this point, I've just got those 2 guardsman tokens. Paul's totally out of resources. I've got initiative, so I'm going to be able to attack, and here is what I do. So I attack with my already wounded token. I do manage to thankfully kill off Paul's copy of Rotten Plague Bears, and I guess the stars kind of shined on me, just that I screwed up retreating with my Warlord more likely than not. I think it's asinine in hindsight that I didn't preserve my guardsman token. But fortunately for my sake, just by the skin of my teeth, I've got a guardsman token at the end of a combat round, and I am going to have the opportunity, courtesy of forward barracks, to generate another token. And because Paul doesn't have any resources, I know there's absolutely nothing he can do at this point to win at this planet, and at this point it's going to be up to him to retreat, or otherwise he'll continue fighting until his warlord is inevitably bloodied. So, I indicate that of course I have to stay because I do not have a choice, and Paul laments the fact that I'm able to generate infinite tokens, and I feel like I didn't necessarily deserve to win this planet after that ridiculous play with my warlord and the token, but regardless, I do manage to capture that first planet. That's going to be a planet of each type being added to my victory display, and that's going to be those guardsman tokens bouncing to my HQ. So, we're about to go through our HQ phase. That'll be 4 resources and 2 cards for each player, and our current planet number 1 is going to be a blue planet that I am likely going to just allow Paul to win. If I can go to planet number 2 or planet number 5, I'll be able to do a route or a random discard based on what Paul draws. For what cards I came across, I got a copy of Summary Execution as well as Troop Transport, so Troop Transport's going to be great, and I could potentially combo that with Summary Execution to unexpectedly turn a planet green, albeit at the cost of sacrificing one of my units. And then, in doing that, I'll be able to use Troop Transport to dump 2 tokens into play. So, wanting to prevent my opponent from getting as much information as possible, like last round it seemed as though Paul had an insurmountable number of cards and resources, but he's spent so much during our last round here, and currently I've got 9 resources and 3 cards with both of my ammo depots. Paul's still got his ammo depot, but he's only got 5 resources, and what definitely hurts him is I'm in such a decent position to continue winning a ton of resources, and even though he's going to be able to likely pull in a lot of cards, I feel pretty good about my ability to just kind of block him wherever he goes. That Troop Transport, should he decide to send Zarathur to planet number 5, I'll be able to pop the Troop Transport, and unless he can kill off both of those tokens, the forward barracks is going to be able to prevent him from being able to do much at that planet by doing that infinite token generation loop. He threw out a copy of Chaos Fanatics to planet number 4, and I'm also thinking that if I dump like an Iron Guard Recruits or something along those lines to that planet, I'll presumably win command at that location, or if he sends his warlord there just to be able to win a couple of resources, there's no way in hell that he's going to be able to win that battle, just because, again, I can fall back on my Troop Transport and my forward barracks. So Paul throws a copy of Snakebite Thug to planet number 1, which I'm okay with. I was already going to just allow him to win it entirely uncontested. I don't care that much if he draws a lot of cards, because again, if he draws a lot of cards, if I keep depriving him of resources, then something I can do is not allow him to benefit from ammo depot. So at planet number 2, I'm winning command. Planet number 3 and planet number 4, I'm also winning command. Between the last round, just think, keep reminding yourself, how many chances did I have to screw up? I didn't use the Steel Legion Chimera, I didn't use the Guardsman token, I didn't use Broderick Worr, so just rest assured that, you should probably play a little bit more conservatively. Like, I did this bizarre mix of it was just awful. So, regardless, Paul throws out he gets rid of his Splintered Path Acolyte, he uses it to create a copy of Zarathur's Flamers, And I'm thinking, okay, maybe he's going to be showing up at planet 2 because he's got the flamers at that planet. That will be his chance to rout, like my Steel Legion Chimera from planet 3. And if Broderick doesn't show up at that location, he'll be able to easily kill my Sanctioned Psyker, which it's not currently at a red planet. So I just think to myself, okay, I'm going to use my Talon Raiders that I drew courtesy of Ammo Depot. I'll put that at planet number 5. Just so I can potentially win command. If Zarathur shows up between the troop transport, there's no way that he's going to be able to win. Both of us use our troop transports. He indicates that he is passed. So I'm going to let Paul have the first planet. I think, okay, if I send Broderick to planet 2, I'll be able to rout his Chaos Fanatics. That seems like it would make sense. If I throw out Iron Guard recruits to planet number 4, I'll be able to win command at that planet no matter what. Or if Zarathur shows up, I'm going to be able to punish him, and he's not going to be able to collect that battle ability. At planet number 3, the Steel Legion Chimera versus Zarathur. Zarathur's probably not going to be able to kill that. At most, he's going to get a couple of resources, and even if I have to blow a troop transport, I feel fine about being able to successfully defend planets 3, 4, or 5. I don't give a shit about planet number 1. And planet number 2, I think, why don't I go ahead and send Broderick to that planet? Because I don't have initiative, but if I put a Rattling Deadeye, I guess I ended up putting the Rattling Deadeye to planet number 3, just to make it all the more of a deterrent for Zarathur to show up to that planet. And I think my thought process there was that if Aatrox Prime, if Zarathur goes to Aatrox and I drop off a bunch of units at planet number 2, it's going to be all the more stuff to get blown up by Aatrox Prime's blast. So I didn't have to worry about Paul doing a Sowing Chaos because he's already passed, so I feel okay putting units out to blue planets, and I guess I'm deciding to do planet number 2 after all. So I'm not exactly sure where Zarathur's going to show up, but kind of like I was counting on, planet number 2 ends up being his destination. So I send my Warlord to planet number 2, and this is going to be nice because I block him from winning command at every planet except for number 1. So I'm going to be able to reel in just a ton of resources, and all he's going to get is 2 cards from planet number 1. So he might come into a bunch of shields, but apart from that, there's not really anything that he's going to be able to do. No Zinch's Firestorm, no... Trying to think of other mid-combat events. There's no Infernal Gateway as an option for him. There's no Warp Storm either. So I'm feeling all right about the way things have gone thus far. He gets his 2 cards, but I get a total of 5 resources and 3 cards, and that puts me at a total of 10 resources and 5 cards relative to his 0 and 6. And I've still got that troop transport. I've still got my forward barracks, and despite all my fuck-ups at planet number 1, I still feel relatively secure in that from this point, provided that, Paul doesn't manage to capture a single additional planet, I'm going to be able to do reasonably well. So I throw out to Paul, mind if I check the RRG for an action flowchart, and I'm going to go ahead and pause the video for a moment while I do that. All right, so what I wanted to go ahead and check the RRG for was I was thinking in my mind, could I do something devious like, let's say I could use Summary Execution to sacrifice my Wounded Guardsman token at planet number 2, then it becomes a green planet, and then would I be able to use my Troop Transport to create 2 2/2 Guardsman tokens, because again, they're at a green planet, and then I could use Preemptive Barrage to attack with my Warlord and both of those tokens against Zarathur. Zarathur's Flamers could, of course, be sacrificed to destroy one of those ranged units because I don't have another 2-value shield card in hand, but I'm thinking that that's still probably a pretty sneaky thing to do, and that could be pretty effective. It might allow me the opportunity to bloody Zarathur, or at the very least, it could allow me to get as much damage out as possible to get Zarathur away from that planet, and then I could knock the Chaos Fanatics into his hand, or I could just allow them to stay at that planet. But more importantly, I could block off Paul from winning that planet. So I announced to Paul, congratulations, planet number 1 is going to be yours. And at this point, he's got 2 blue technology icons, 1 red material type icon, and 1 green strongpoint icon. So here, I take a moment to write into the chat log what exactly I'm going to do. So I say, okay, so ranged skirmish will start. There's an action window before the first ranged combat turn. I would like to take an action. I use summary execution to discard my wounded guardsman token, and I turn the planet green. And I feel like this is an, advanced play here, like an advanced skill level play that I'm doing, which is just strikingly dissimilar to all the suboptimal garbage I did earlier in this video. So hopefully, this will maybe make up for just that god-awful play in the minds and hearts of my dear viewers. So I say action 1, summary execution. Action 2, troop transport explodes. That's going to be discarded. So I generate 2 guardsman tokens. Now, we've still yet to start our we've still yet to take an actual ranged skirmish turn, so I throw out Preemptive Barrage. I pick both Guardsman tokens in Broderick Worr, and now I'm going to indicate I'm finally done with actions. So just minding the order of my discard pile, I'm going to keep Preemptive Barrage on the table, and in just a moment, I'll have to be putting the summary execution underneath the troop transport. Not that it matters at this point, but there may well come a day in our card pool where the order of discarded cards matters, and despite playing in a digital surface like this, that's no excuse for sloppy play, despite what you witnessed, of course, earlier in this match. So all of my units have got ranged. Paul's only action available to him is going to be to blow up the Zarathur's Flamers. So if Paul doesn't have 3 shield cards in hand, well, okay, so basically if Paul doesn't have a single shield card in hand, if he doesn't detonate his so if Paul does not sacrifice his Zarathur's Flamer, I'll potentially deal out 6 points of damage to his Warlord. He would have to have 3 or more value worth of shield cards to prevent his Warlord from being bloodied, and he does decide to sacrifice his Flamer, which I'm frankly okay with. It's an absolute nightmare of a unit. I think it's one of the more powerful signature army units in the game, and I absolutely hate them, and, I'll happily exchange a Guardsman token for Zarathur's Flamers being destroyed, but it's ranged. I take a shot with my Guardsman token. He discards a copy of Slaaneash's Temptation, and that's going to drop him down to 6 cards. I've got Broderick Worr. I didn't feel like Preemptive Barrage was critical to my winning this battle, but I didn't want to take any silly risks, and I feel like I'll be able to achieve sufficient mass at any of these planets that if I could take a bit of a gamble to potentially bloody his Warlord, I may as well do it. And I also feel pretty good about, let's say if Zarathur shows up during another round, not exhausted, but his units in HQ arrive with him exhausted, then I am predicting that I'll be able to throw enough units between all of our different planets to kill off whatever combat units he brings with him. So I only managed to deal 2 successful points of damage to Zarathur. I do not decide to trigger this effect, and then I go ahead and rearrange my discard pile here. So summary execution, troop transport, and the preemptive barrage in that order. The reason I decide not to trigger Farron is because the Chaos Fanatics aren't doing him any good sitting at planet number 4. If I win planet number 1 and 2, as soon as we go to our HQ phase here, then that is going to be victory for me, and therefore I don't really see any benefit from putting, for allowing him to relocate his Chaos Fanatics, which are currently not allowing him to win a command struggle. And if I absolutely have to, I could throw another copy of Iron Guard Recruits out to Ossus 4 and then immediately make up the price of those units. But we go into our HQ phase. That's of course 4 resources and 2 cards for each player. I've got 13 resources and 4 cards. Paul's got 3 resources, 7 cards. He puts a copy of Rogue Trader out to planet number 4, and I decide to play a copy of Captain Marcus. So I've got to get myself down to 3 cards before I can do my ammo depots. I put another copy of Troop Transport into play, which is going to be great if Paul decides to go to, like, any green planets, and I'm just thinking to myself, okay, I've got to shore up planet number 1 and planet number 2. Note, I've got initiative at planet number 1, and so long as I can do that, like, if Paul shows up at planet 4 or 5, he's going to drop off a large number of combat units, 5 total resources and 2 cards between that Snakebite Thug and the Noise Marine Zealots, and then I don't have to exactly worry about those. His Warlord has only got 2 points of damage remaining, and I guess I'm just kind of waiting to see what exactly Paul does. Captain Marcus is only 3 costs, but he's a 2/3, and I could exhaust an enemy unit during command. I could exhaust an enemy unit during combat, so I feel like that's an excellent 1 copy in this deck card to throw out to my victory condition planet there, Aatrox Prime. And I'm just trying to wait and see what Paul does. As soon as he does anything, I'll be able to play my ammo depot. I'll be able to put another thing into play. I'll be able to use another copy of Ammo Depot. Paul invests another couple of resources in a copy of Chaos Fanatics, and I'm just thinking to myself, okay, if Paul is trying to stall, he's no longer got enough resources to play a copy of Sowing Chaos, and the only unit he'll be able to destroy with that is that 1 copy of Rattling Deadeye. Paul has currently passed, and therefore I'm now free to really do whatever I want to any of these different planets. I could start deploying very heavily to planet number 2, my victory condition planet, but I'm going to have to make it through another deploy phase prior to my being able to go into combat, and Sowing Chaos is a deploy action, so I don't want to put any 2 or fewer cost units to planet number 2 yet. So I use another action to put another copy of Iron Guard Recruits to planet number 3, and that is going to allow me to win a command. So I accidentally move a Rattling Deadeye to the table. I then return it to my hand and play it, so it automatically subtracts the resources. And this is another move that I did because I now know full well that Paul is not going to be able to use Sowing Chaos, and I'm thinking, okay, do I want to play out more cards or not? I don't want to deploy heavily to planet number 2 just because he might have a Sowing Chaos in hand for the following round, but I'm thinking, okay, do I want to do Ingenseer Augur to planet number 1? If Zarathur shows up at planet number 1, none of my units are going to be getting attack bonuses. He might go to planet number 2, but then I'll have a couple of ranged pot shots that I can take at Zarathur, so I think that's unlikely. So I'm thinking Zarathur might go to planet number 1. It seems kind of asinine for Zarathur to go to planets either 3 or 4, and I think that since I've got Broderick Worr alone in my HQ, why don't I decide to go to planet number 4 and shut off my opponent's card, well, his 2 cards and his resource that he could potentially be gaining from that planet if he were to send his Warlord there. But basically, I just want to kill his dumbass rogue trader, and I want those cards for myself to draw into tricks for combat, because for all I know, I might end up drawing into a preemptive barrage. So I'm trying to decide if I go to planet, okay, so if Zarathur goes to planet number 1, all he'll be able to do is he'll be able to get a couple of resources. He could do a Warp Storm, but I'll have a copy of Troop Transport, I'll have Forward Barracks, and I'm just trying to convince myself, do I want to do this or not? So in hindsight, I'm not sure if this was the right choice or not, putting those Anxious Infantry platoons at planets 1 and 2 just because Sowing Chaos is indeed still going to be a problem, but I put my second copy of Anxious Infantry platoon out on the table, and I'm trying to decide whether or not that would be a good move or not. I'm trying to determine, are there any of these planets that if I were to have Zarathur show up, would he be able to potentially kill off my units there? I decided to put the Anxious Infantry platoon to planet number 4 just so I don't need to send my Warlord there, because I figure if I drop off my Warlord at planet number 1, I'll be able to rout any problematic enemy units, I'll be able to maintain initiative, I'll be able to attack before Zarathur can. So if Zarathur shows up at planet number 1, he's potentially going to be bloodied. Same thing goes for planet number 2. If he shows up at planet number 3 or 4, I'm going to be able to use Troop Transport, and really at this point, I'm just trying to decide where exactly I want to send my guys. It may have been ideal to not put put that Anxious Infantry platoon at planet number 2 just for the sake of a Sowing Chaos coming up, but all the same, I figured that I'm going to have a large number of units showing up in my HQ at the end of the round, and then I can redeposit those to planet number 2. I can use all those ammo depots. I can presumably draw a fair few cards, and in doing all of that, hopefully I'll come across enough just things to put into play to sufficiently kind of garrison myself, wall myself in at that planet, and end up winning out over Paul. So I finally have decided a Warlord destination. I decided upon planet number 1, and looks like Paul decides to go for planet number 1 as well. So Paul must have been trying for, it's not a victory condition planet for him, but it would have allowed him to potentially route something, and he may have been thinking that I was just going to try to give up that planet, just because I've got units there, but like my Sanctioned Psyker is attacking for 0, my Guardsmen aren't really going to be able to do anything. Paul says that's probably game, because note, I'm going to be winning command on each and every one of these planets, and I wasn't exactly sure how to phrase this in a gentlemanly manner, but I just say if at any point you do want to call it, feel free to say the word. Paul is one of the, probably better, one of the greatest players out there in the Conquest LCG community. Like I said, he runs that statistical database that's got a tremendous number of matches of his entered in it. He's got a great win-loss rate, and he's definitely been around this game from the beginning, and if there's anybody that's probably just got like spot-on combat math, it's going to be Paul. So a truly formidable player here, and just in hindsight, if I do end up winning this match, I definitely cannot say that I necessarily deserve it in the context of those kind of inexcusable, like the retreat was fine, but that Guardsman token, I can never forget it. But we're going to move into combat. My Engine Seer Augur takes an attack of 2, directed at Zarathur. He discards a copy of Tzeentch's Firestorm in order to block off that effect. He retreats with Zarathur, so I imagine he must not have any shield cards or a sufficient number of shield cards to hang around. I decide to attack with my Warlord, deal a couple points of damage out to that copy of Noise Marine Zealots. In hindsight, this was probably suboptimal to attack with my Warlord first. I can't quite recall why I decided to do that. Just because normally, like if he were to use a copy of Infernal Gateway to dump a copy of Noise Marine Zealots onto that planet, I would have wanted to be able to retreat with my Warlord, so that seems kind of asinine to have attacked in that sense. I don't have a suppressive fire or anything cute along those lines to use, so I'm deciding, okay, why don't I use my Guardsman tokens to deal damage to that Snakebite Thug? I can retreat with Broderick at the end of the round, and then that Noise Marine Zealots is only going to be able to attack for 2 as opposed to 4. So I have my Guardsman tokens deal out 2 points of damage, my Sanctioned Psyker attacks for 0, and now we're going to come to the end of a combat round, and there's really no reason for me to hang around with my Warlord. So all of our units ready. Once again, my forward barracks is going to trigger. That's going to be an additional Guardsman token for me. I indicate that with a selection to note that I trigger it. At the end of a combat round, I retreat with my Warlord. All of my units stay at that planet. There's no reason to retreat them from planet number 1. And let us see here. Paul decides to retreat with each and every one of his units, which makes sense, but I definitely wasn't expecting it. And that is going to be my capturing the planet, and therefore I'm going to be able to... I call out no trigger, and I guess in hindsight what I could have done is I could have routed... Like, it wouldn't really make too much of a difference, but I could have routed his Rogue Trader so that he would not have had the option to potentially promote it the following round. So I think that was suboptimal as well, because if he could have promoted it, 3 command icons would have beaten my 1, and unless I draw into more economy units or something along those lines, that could have potentially let him gain 2 cards and 1 resource to come back into this. So my biggest fear right now is going to to be Warp Storm during the combat phase, but I've got that troop transport, I've got forward barracks, and I'm hoping I'm going to be able to win a battle of attrition. So this is presumably going to be our final round of combat. This is going to be my victory condition planet as our current planet number 1. Both of us have come across 4 resources and 2 cards. Paul uses his first deploy action to throw out a copy of Zave's Split Tongue to planet number 1. And this was a very interesting play. So I say that's a cool combo with Sowing Chaos, because I assume that's going to be the other card Paul has in hand. And now what I want to try to do is to delay as long as possible. What's going to be too bad is if Paul does play Sowing Chaos, it's going to kill my Rattling Deadeyes and my Anxious Infantry platoon, and he'll generate 3 Chimera token. So what do I decide to do? I decide to put out a Rogue Trader to planet number 3. Just because I could put it to planet number 1, but I imagine it's probably going to be consumed by a copy of Sowing Chaos. So it's going to be Paul's option to take an action here. He says it would be a cool combo to use Sowing Chaos, and I'm of course not disappointed. Paul throws Sowing Chaos onto the table. That's going to be my 3 units destroyed, and thanks to Zave's Split Tongue, he's going to generate 3 resource tokens, and those are potentially going to be arriving alongside his Warlord to try to just destroy me during combat. But Paul is now going to be out of resources. He's going to have a lot of units arriving exhausted to that planet, but because he's run out of cards, I now know I could put my Sakhalem Shrine Guard to, I suppose it may as well be planet number 1. I can use them as suppressive fire fodder, or if I'm fortunate enough to come into a copy of Summary Execution, I don't know if I've seen both copies or not, I might be able to turn the planet green, but a 1/1 is better than nothing. It's going to soak up another attack at that planet, and despite it not being a green planet, each and every body makes it all the less likely that Paul is going to be able to win, just because of the attrition-style victory I might be able to ground out thanks to forward barracks. So Paul uses his ammo depot. I put out a Talarn Raiders, so that's going to be attacking for 2, provided a Warlord is present at that planet. It's going to be back to Paul. He's got 0 resources and 4 cards, and imagining that both of our Warlords are going to be showing up to planet number 1, this is going to be yet another command phase in which Paul is not going to be able to win any resources whatsoever. So Paul indicates that he is done. I trigger my ammo depot. I draw another copy of Rogue Trader, and there's not really a lot of benefit to putting this unit out, but because I don't have to worry about Sowing Chaos, I do go ahead and put it into play at planet number 1. I put out an Iron Guard Recruits as well, and like I said, those units aren't doing anything, but they make it all the more likely that I'll be able to win through attrition, courtesy of that forward barracks, just because if you cannot kill more than 1 unit around, there's no way that you're going to be able to win. So both of us are currently deciding where exactly to send our Warlords. I've got a lot of units in my HQ that are going to be showing up to planet number 1. That is my victory condition planet through red material type icons. I can only imagine that Paul as well is going to be showing up at planet number 1, and let us see how our command phase and our combat ends up getting resolved. I go ahead and flip my servo skull indicating planet number 1, and Paul flips his servo skull indicating planet number 5, so his Warlord is going to be sent to the final planet. And of course, after a little bit of trolling, Paul calls out the GG, so that is going to be good game, well played, a fantastic game against Paul Steiner, an absolutely excellent player, and despite some just egregious errors, some hideous transgressions on my part, I was able to win over the course of a long game. So Paul decided not to send all of his units to planet number 1, where they'd have shown up exhausted. I'd have beaten, battered, and bloodied his Warlord. I'd have killed his units, like the Zarathur's Flamers, that Zave's Split Tongue. It was a great game. It was definitely a nail-biter the entire time, but that first match at Iridial, well, the first significant combat at Iridial, I just really think made or broke this game. So Paul throws out that forward barracks is crazy good, and indeed it most definitely is. So, in Paul's honor, because I knocked him out of the Black Crusade, I'm going to be advancing to the top 16 single elimination round. I'll just definitely suggest whenever you play a game of Conquest, whether it's competitive, whether it's casual, go to 40kconquest.blogspot.com and enter your results so the entire community can benefit. We've probably got approaching 4,000 games in total cataloged in that database. It helps us to figure out which warlords are in which tier, who some of the best warlords and decks are, who some of the worst are, and just to figure out all sorts of different percentages and statistics. And it really is a monumentally useful database. I cannot recommend it enough, and it's only as good as the data that gets input in it. So I definitely beg you, encourage you to use it. But regardless, a very well-played game by Paul. I'm pleased to have won my top 32 match. Hopefully, I'm going to be able to win my top 16 as well. But if I do, then it's still top 8, top 4, and then the finals. So I think there's probably some small sliver of a chance that I'll be able to end up winning this tournament, but I definitely would not count on it. And I almost look forward to being eliminated as quickly as possible so I can just knock it off with these monumentally stressful high-stakes matches. But if you made it this far, thank you very much for watching. I dearly appreciate your patience putting up with another enormously long video, but hopefully you enjoyed this game. Hopefully you learned from my mistakes and my suboptimal play, but be sure to let me know in the comments what you think I could have done differently to improve. Definitely that Steel Legion move, not shielding that token, maybe even retreating with my Warlord, but I'm sure there are myriad other suboptimal plays as well. So, thank you very much for watching, and as always, if you enjoyed this content, be sure to hit that like button and consider subscription to this channel if you've not done so already, or if you are already subscribed, as ever, you're always encouraged to share this content, because the more engagement these videos receive, the more new players stumble upon Conquest, they might give this living card game a try, join our community, and of course, all together, we continue to send the message to Fantasy Flight Games, telling them to continue to develop and support this fantastic product. If at any point you'd like to get in touch with me, I would encourage you to do so through Facebook or on Twitter, and if you ever feel kind and generous enough to help support the Hive Tyrant, I would be honored, humbled, and deeply appreciative were you to make a donation or contribution to my Patreon. Even $1 or $2 on a strictly monthly basis nevertheless does wonders in helping me recover some of my file hosting and operating expenses. So, as always, thank you so much for watching, and once again, be sure to check back in again soon for much more Conquest LCG content to come.